Hey guys, I wanted to cover a Postman video for you and just show you what I do with Postman and some things basic things that you can do with Postman. If you're working with a REST API, then you're probably familiar with some of these, but I'm just going to cover them real quick. Get, put, post, delete, and patch. I'm not going to worry about head at the moment, but obviously a get call is basically making a request to a server and an endpoint and getting data and information back. A put call for a REST API is saying, I want to go ahead and update something that's on the resource of the server and replace that information. A post call is basically creating something new on the server, maybe a new user or a new subscription or something like that on the REST API endpoint. Obviously, delete is to remove and get rid of a user or subscription or something else that's out there. A patch call is replacing some individual field or maybe several fields that you want on the REST API endpoint. So for example, maybe you want to update just a email address on the REST API. So you'd make a patch call passing the new email address information and maybe in the query parameters, maybe the ID of that resource. And then it would keep all the other fields the way they were and it would update just the email address. As far as Postman goes, I'm going to show you with the Postman Echo. You can follow along with the same website. Go ahead and install Postman and then open it up. What we're going to do is just do a basic GET request. So create a collection. We'll just call it test for now. But this would actually be the collection name that you'd want to create to put together your stuff. So if you're working on maybe, let's say, a user authentication type program, you might want to put that as the collection name. So create that, and then you have three dots of the ellipsis over here. You can click that and then create a add request, and then we're going to name this test. We'll call it test get. It's already in the collection folder, so just hit save and open it up. You can see these little expands here with a little arrow, and then click on it. On the right pane is basically what you're going to set up. Right now, nothing's done. There's no request URL. I'm going to dump in a request URL, and that's Postman Echo. This is what I was referring to before, which is all the different ways that you can make calls for the REST API endpoints. We're going to leave it as get because that's what this call is. And then Postman basically breaks out the query parameters and puts them here, which are these tabs here, and sets them out for you. So I can actually make changes here, and it will change it right in the URL. It's real nice. So if we send that request, we get back a JSON data. It's beautifully formatted, and it's a great response. Makes it real easy to debug and deal with API calls. So you can make changes here, and then basically any changes you make, you hit send, and you get your response back down here. Postman allows you to look at cookies and headers and anything else that you want to look at for a request call. If you've been using curl, curl's great, but one of the advantages I find with Postman, as I have huge amounts of collection folders, is that it's a very simplified way for me to keep things together. It's kind of like snippets of code, and you can go through and make several API calls without a lot of effort, and you don't have to remember things. You can even do really fancy things like a pre-request script, which is basically writing using the Postman. It's similar to JavaScript, but basically you can set up and have it build out a pre-request data where you can manipulate the data on the fly. So you're not hard coding necessarily maybe the query params that we've got here. Maybe based on how you want the request, it's making changes. One example where I've used the pre-request was that we had a client that was interested in having us hit their API, and with Postman it was troublesome because the way that the API endpoint listened was it required the authentication to basically take together whatever data that you were sending. So anytime that you would massage the data here and make changes, your header here for the API key actually had to have an MD5 hash of that data. And it's a little difficult to do that. You'd have to hash it and then come back and then, change the hash algorithm every time you would manipulate any data. But if you work with a pre-request script, basically what I did was I wrote a script that would go through and then write that out automatically. So anytime I make changes, it would read the data and then it would write the new API key, and then you could hit send and it would send off the data, which is really nice. Another thing that Postman has, which is really cool, is you can actually do tests as well. So you can go through and you can set up a variation of different tests that you want Postman to do. I'm not going to cover that in this video. And you can have it even go through all of the tests to see if they pass or fail. It's pretty powerful. There's a lot of other things like workspaces up here that you can choose. You can work with teams. One of the other things I want to show you is environments, which is used pretty heavily. So if you've got like a 3-tiered system where you've got like dev, QA, and stage and prod, one of the things you want to do is you go in here, you hit this little gear, and you hit add. You can set up environment variables. So let's say you have a development server and maybe your URL, you don't want to hard code it. So you want to say, dev, I'm making this up, but dev URL. And then the variable is, let's get the Postman URL here. You go in here, you put that as the initial value. And then if you copy this, you hit add. And then you can just, this is kind of funky how they have the UI, but if you just close this window, it's saved, you're good. Now over here in environment, you pull this down, hit dev. You can actually replace this. Whoops, hang on. And you see how it changed colors. You can actually replace that with the environment variable that you set. So now when I hit this, it's basically, Postman's going through it saying, oh, you want me to replace this variable with that URL, and that's exactly what it's doing. If you, let's say, had a QA, maybe you had another one, you could hit add, you could do the QA environment, and the same thing, you hit your maybe you wouldn't call it dev URL, it's a horrible name, but you could basically say, go to Google or something like that. Maybe that was your QA environment, hit add, close the window, and now if you pull this down, of course I'm going to get an error, but at least, if I hover it, you can see now it's going to Google. So the idea is that you can pick different environments and the requests are all the same. So as you propagate through each environment, you pull this down and you can pick your dev, QA, and stage, prod, etc. The other thing you can do is you can, you got your collection over here, you can right click on it, you hit duplicate, and you can pull this down. And let's say that, I don't know if, let me just close this. Let's go get a post call here. Let's do this. So you can go in here, you can basically say, oh, I want to do a post call. Let me hit send. And let me see if I can add any raw data. So you pick body, you can pick raw, and then maybe you want to do like a JSON request. And maybe we'll just do test. I don't know if Postman echo is going to, there it is. So data test is returned from the post call. There's a lot of options. This thing's extremely flexible. I really love this tool. I've been using it for years and I've been very, very happy with it. It's super powerful. It is an Electron app. So some people are, not super keen on it, but I find it barely uses any resources and it just seems to get the job done. When you are building your collections, I'll show you one more thing. You can do folders within folders. So you hit this ellipsis. You can also do folder. So let's say you're doing a test and maybe you want, I'm just trying to think here, maybe, user, I'll call it user stuff. You don't have to set a description, and then let's say that you want this in there, poof. Now you basically can organize your stuff, and then you go back here, you maybe create a new folder, and maybe you want, I don't know, description. You set up description, and then in here, maybe you got different requests. The idea is that, you can start to grow and really build out some really cool requests. I've done this as well with like APIs for Stripe and stuff like that, where you can do some really cool stuff. That's about all. I mean, I'll show you one more thing actually. If you hit import, you can do a paste raw text. So I don't know if we have a curl call here. Yeah, here we go. So let's say that you've got a curl call and somebody gave it to you from maybe the web browser or something. You can actually paste that in and it will build a tab with all the stuff that the curl call did. You can just hit send if you don't want to do any saving, but if you want to save it, it adds everything in there from a curl call automatically for you. Very cool feature. I don't know. I love this tool. So if you're working with REST APIs, I highly recommend to use this tool. Anyway, see you next time.